Manhood, brought to you in part by Solomon's Bespoke.
This is Manhood. Thank you for joining us once again, where we always aim to be better as brothers. And it's been a while since I've said it, but I'm going to say it again. This is indeed a space of courage. And we aim not to speak on behalf of all men, but we are a few men speaking to all men. Life is simply what you make it. And today's topic is no different. We are speaking about, do you have limits? And to have that discussion, to my right, Johan Seayodike, behavior change consultant. To his right, Alvin, Clayton, artist, entrepreneur, and so many other hats, limitless. And to his right, the one, the only, Michael Phillips. Do I begin to tick off all the different titles that you have? Box lunch, Callaloo. Everything is like a melting pot of activities. But cyclist, entrepreneur, artist, musician. Very, very, very happy to have all of you here. And I mean, what could be a better panel to have that discussion? Do you have limits?
Quick answer.
Well, I think.
Yes, no. Do you have limits?
Of course, I have limits.
So you're limited. Do you have limits?
I think we all do. I do.
All right.
I'll find out.
We'll find out here now. But when we say, do you have limits? Not from the sense of, do you have patience, or can you,
Trini vernacular.
Trini vernacular, yeah. When I say, do you have limits, and maybe that's something I should be a bit clearer about, meaning, never limit yourself to one thing. Never be cubbyhole or boxed in, or let anyone tell you that you cannot do something. You know, a lot of times you find when people say to achievers, to people who have that sort of soldier mindset, the champion mindset, you know, telling someone they can't do something is when they actually achieve it. And you gentlemen, knowing your background, and so many ways that it happens, some by coincidence, some by choice, and when I say choice, meaning actually focused choice to actually go and pursue something, have achieved so much. For example, Alvin, starting off, moving to the United States, I believe when you were 14, going into modeling, then from having a very successful
Football first.
Football first. Yeah. There we go. Football, then going in, life change with regards to that, having a successful modeling career. Then from modeling, you found yourself into the culinary industry, and now in art. Right. So there's so many, like yourself, cyclists into always an artist and musician now. Again, never being limited to one thing or allowing someone to cubbyhole. And you even, Alvin, had shared with us that artists, like we know in so many areas in Trinidad and Tobago especially, where when you say you want to go into the creative industry, it's always like
it's been
rubbish.
There's some pushback on
that.
Yeah.
You want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a pilot, all of these different things. So what I want is in that sphere, just to share a bit about your stories as to how you did not allow yourself to be limited.
Well, I mean, I could start. I mean, for me, always being born in Trinidad, there's so many things that we have to adapt to, correct? And so I think in general, we come from a creative society. You make things happen. But for me, having the opportunities presented to yourself and then putting your all into it is what actually makes the difference. And so when I hear you say, do you have limitations? We have limitations to the fact that, I mean, if somebody falls on the street and they need medical help, there's only so much that I can do, right? But if there are other factors that we have that's already inherent in us, and we feel, if we put that effort into that, we can become whatever, because people don't really know what's inside of us. And so that's my drive to do the things that I've done. You just kind of believing in yourself. And sometimes it's just having somebody give you that little seed, or they see something in you and they know, and then you have to question yourself, well, do I have it in me, and do I have the drive to actually do it and make it happen? One of the things that somebody once, approached me about being an actor, And I've done a couple of movies, but while doing the movies, I realized the energy that it takes to really be an amazing actor is really deep. And I wasn't willing to do that time to get there. And I prefer to be an artist, a painter. And so that's where my energies are. But there's like no limit. It's a matter of fact whether you're willing to put the work in to accomplish the results that you want.
I agree with what you're saying. And even going back to your first point, when you said if someone falls on the street, there's only so much you can do. I disagree with you,
Yeah.
because you even contradicted what you said, and you said it's what you're willing to do. Because let me just give you an example. If someone falls on the street and if you don't do something, they die, and you're willing to do it, you might find some way to bring some knowledge or do something. Not to say it may work. We don't know if it will work. But even finding it inside of you. And I think that's the important part. Are you willing?
But whatever you do, don't just pull out your phone and start to record. As so many do, actually make an effort to assist and to help,
Right.
If you're pulling out your phone, please make sure it's
Unless
to call
you think that will
911.
help, Unless you think that will help.
I mean, unless it's an accident and something's happening and you need it for evidence, call 911 or make a choice. But I want to come back to you gentlemen, both yourself, Alvin and Michael, for people to understand that journey, because, and I'm using the word, I normally don't, but I'm using the word soccer. I mean, I'm of the football word, but you went to the United States, to DC, to play soccer. Would you have seen, if someone told you back then that you'd have taken on all these other roles and be so successful in it, what would you tell them?
You know what? I that's a great question, because I look back on my life so many times and see myself as a 5-year-old boy in Trinidad, right, running around and just playing and stuff like that. And if somebody back then had told me that my life is going to be what it is now, I would have said you're crazy or whatever, right? So the whole thing is, though, it's going to the United States wasn't really so much about playing soccer. It was about going to get an education, and that was the reason I went to high school. I started high school there, and having an advantage, growing up as a young boy in Trinidad playing soccer. I mean, so when you go to the United States, you almost have an advantage over people that are from there, because soccer was becoming something that was new to them. And so I excelled in that, and then I was fortunate enough to get a college scholarship to play soccer, and excelled at that as well in college, and then got the opportunity to be drafted by San Diego. The timing was wrong for what I did, but once again, the timing of that and something not working there led me to something else, to the modeling industry, which turned out to work very well for me because of decisions that I made that were sensitive. I mean, when I started with Wilhelmina Modeling Agency back in the day, every single model that I knew wanted to go to GQ magazine. I never wanted to go to GQ because I saw my portfolio. My portfolio had great pictures, but I saw people with better portfolios that weren't working for GQ. So I'd be like, why would they want to use me? And I waited 6 months until I felt that my portfolio was in a good place. I came to my agent one day and I said, you know what? Her name is Martha Paccio. And I said, Martha, I think I'm ready to see GQ. She makes a call for me. I go in. I meet the model editor at GQ. I literally had a 3-minute meeting with them. But when I presented my portfolio, I felt very comfortable presenting my pictures. Came back to the agency and she asked, how did the interview go? I said, I thought it went well. She said to me, it must have went really well because they just booked you to work with them tomorrow. So I saw them today, and they booked me the same day to work for. And back then, I mean, GQ is everybody wanted to be in GQ. So I had 4 pages. Then I did the job. I had to make a decision at that time as well. Everybody that I've ever seen in GQ had that GQ look, someone just killed your dog, right? So I was like, okay, am I supposed to give the GQ look when I worked for GQ? And my portfolios were basically a lot of smiles and, very warm and affable. So I said, you know what? They saw my portfolio. I'm going to do me. And I had the confidence enough that when I did the booking to be very easy and open. I came back to the agency at the end of the day. my agent asked me again, how did it go? I said, it went really well. She said, it must have went really well because they just booked you again. And so there was supposed to be in 2 separate issues, the pages that I did. Each shoot was for 4 pages. One was with a very famous photographer, Arthur Elgort, and Arthur did the shots. And then the second shoot was with Olivera Toscani, who did all of the Benetton ads back in the day. And something happened. It came out in 1 issue. And it was the first time that a black model had 8 full pages in GQ, and that what made my career. I had a 25-year career where I worked at least once a week as a model for 15 years. So.
Everywhere Trinidadian go, it's always successful. And right. I say that to even those viewing, as a boy, girl in Trinidad, even somebody in the late 30s who think it's too late to do whatever. Trinidadians worldwide doing what we do best.
I agree.
Which is be yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Be yourself, and doors will simply open. You know, I have that thing about, we are Trinbagonians. As Trinidad and Tobago, I just want to make sure.
My apologies. Trinbagonians. You know what I mean, but I'll still say.
And to say that, but coming back to the fact that, do you have limits? And the truth is, there are no limits, because until you push those limits, you never know what's on the other side.
Yeah.
True.
And then when you push it, you realize, wait, no, I thought this was the ceiling, and I reach here.
But that's a question of potential, and actually realizing something, because I would tell you, that term that we came up with the last time, the fashionably unimpressed, that really, where that concept in my mind first came about is when I saw his interview on Style with Elsa Clench, CNN, years ago.
Style with Elsa Clench.
Style with
wow.
Elsa Clench.
We're dating ourselves here.
And I'm sitting looking
I
at
was
it.
10.
So this would have been the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I sat looking at this and I said, that's a Trinidadian. Wow. And then she was saying, one of the things she was featuring his modeling career, but she looked at his art. I was painting, but I really the possibilities of what could I do with my art. So I'm sitting and looking at him and saying, "Wow, I want to paint. I want to pursue this thing."
Wow.
And because she was asking questions, so I heard some interesting people have you work in their collections, like Robert De Niro, like Al Pacino, and so on. And I'm like, what Denzel? It was like, what? So, but what was surprising to me is until Elsa Clench, I didn't know who he was. And at that point in time, for all the years that went by, I couldn't understand why people that achieve really impressive things like this aren't, it's like an indicator and a pathway to point people in the direction of exploring talent and where you can go with it. And sometimes those things, the opportunity may not reside in Trinidad, but why not have people that could come and find and pluck talents from here to achieve those things that are in markets globally? And I think that's one of the things we're lacking with. But the other thing with music, apart from our Bosco Holder, we were just talking about the Holder brothers, he planted that seed in my head years ago, and I didn't take him on. Bosco, play an instrument. I remember in music school, teacher trying to put something on a block. That just didn't. But, when I started playing, the first thing I thought about, Bosco would be laughing his head off today. Wow. After all that gun talk I given, that I never going to be able to play an instrument.
But is it you, Alvin, that said that Joffrey, Bosco's brother, said you never really die? You're just going on tour.
Yeah.
So wherever he is on tour, he's probably here,
right.
going,
giving you kudos.
Correct. So for me, I remember I met you at Hilton.
Yeah.
All right. And when I went, for whatever reason, I can't remember something random thing, and he's there, I think it was like the bar area, whatever it is. I was like, I saw your interview on television, and we started chatting since, and
caught on as friends.
Correct.
No, but, it's an interesting thing. I was listening to you talking about it, right? And opportunities, right? How they come about. So for me, art was something that I always loved, but I had to keep it inside once again because, it's not something you can tell your parents you want it to be coming from the Caribbean a lot of times. And I was like fell in love with Matisse's work, started copying the work for no other reason except to paint for myself. And it so happens sometimes, the universe chooses and gives you your blessings, right? Because Elsa Clinch, I did my very first show in New York at the Lee Arthur studio in Soho. And when Elsa Clinch was doing the feature on me, she used the art as part of the story, And I had no idea, that I was going to be this artist that's kind of getting around in all these different places. And it was just out of my passion, and the blessings came after. Because after that CNN show came, people were calling me from all over the world, because CNN goes all over the world. Where can we buy your paintings? I had no idea where to tell them, because the show that I did at Lee Arthur Studio was for 2 weeks. I mean, we sold half of the show out, but art wasn't in my lexicon to be a career. And so one thing led to another, and then people saw that, and they started renting my paintings for movies and different things like that. The last movie I did was The Best Man Holiday. I did the artwork for that movie. But certain things, you kind of just go about, and it leads to other things. And it leads to the thing that having the opportunity is the start of it all.
I was just gonna say, so because people listening are probably thinking, the typical thing that you hear, wow, you were just really lucky. And they say luck is opportunity plus preparedness.
Preparation, yeah, actually.
Is luck. You have to be, yes, the opportunity needs to present itself, but it is the person who knows and can visualize and is prepared for that moment then gets what most people call luck.
Yes.
And you have, based on that description, you've had a lot of it. Yeah. And it seems that I would say now, Alvin, in your space, that you don't see yourself limited. The world can indeed be your oyster.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to name drop here, but my wife, we were having a conversation with this guy that a few of you might recognize his name, Denzel Washington. And,
I've heard of him.
Yeah. And my wife said to him at one point, you've gotten some really lucky breaks. And Denzel actually said what you just said. He goes, the more prepared I was, the luckier I became.
So you're saying that Denzel and I are on the same wavelength.
Absolutely.
Right, okay. I received that.
But the other thing that people tend to say, I'm sure you get it as well, oh, you're so talented. But talent only gets you so far. It may give you an indication in the early part of things because you just happened into something. But you don't get really good at anything without obsessive repetition. And having to, so Alvin was talking about, taking a direction of whether or not he wanted to do acting or whatever. Those are really serious. Yeah. You're going to go through a lot of difficult, lean times in any direction. That is something that is an indication of elite, to make a living off of it. It's an elite sphere.
I also believe that there's so many talented people. There's lots of talented people in all the art forms, right? But I do believe also, no matter how talented you are, the universe has a purpose for all of us. And I think, for myself, I know when I was modeling, there's 100 people that could probably do the job that I was doing. I always felt that. And so I never, believed my own press, right? But for whatever reason, I was the one that got that blessing. And I really, truly believe that. We had a saying and a joke we used to do with modeling. It's like, how many models does it take to read a magazine? We used to say 20, 1 to say that's me, and 19 to say I could have done that. So the thing is though, it's in the arts, I mean, to even take some of the actors, I've seen actors that have gotten lots of kudos, and I've seen other actors that I thought were more talented than they were. But they were that was for them.
They were the ones that got the break.
Exactly.
So we're talking about, do you have limits? There is a limit to this particular segment. So we need to take that break.
Right.
We're going to come back with do you have limits, and talk about, as much as we say there are Trinis everywhere, why Johanse, and I want you to address this after the break, do we allow ourselves to be limited, and why is it part of the almost upbringing that it's in there. It's in that DNA almost, that you have to limit. You can't do this, or you can't do that, or you shouldn't do this, or you need to go and do this other job. That one will get you nowhere. Why do that? After the
This is manhood, and we're asking the question, are there limits, or do we have limits? And before we ended the last segment, you alluded to the fact if our socialization and the way we were conditioned, if that contributes to limits, and specifically to us here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I would say yes, because a lot of us, I mean, may not be modern day, but at least when I was growing up, that was in the 80s, right? We looked at ourselves as a small island. Even though we look at ourselves, even though we are one of the more established in the Caribbean belt, but we still look at ourselves as a small island. I was always told, look how small Trinidad is on the map. Look how small
a dot on the map.
we are. So I remember my concept of the world, I was a dot. I remember thinking that as a child. And then when you mentioned you saw him on Style with Elcha Clench, I remember Style with Elcha Clench, and when we only had one TV station, right? So whether or not it had no cartoons or anything to watch.
No choice.
Right? But those things were so far removed. Something like CNN was nothing in my sphere, right? And I remember, I can't remember who it was, but even hearing somebody on CNN even say the word Trinidad.
Yeah, it was
right?
a big
that
thing.
was like
Yeah.
such a big thing. So I'm saying, even from that perspective, seeing yourself as a dot and seeing things like Hollywood or the States or Europe as these things so far away and so bigger than us. And our parents instilling that into us, we would think that, nah, boy, I can't make that's for someone else. That is not for me. And then when you look at TV, many times things on TV were glorified. And meaning that, and I wasn't seeing Trinidadians on TV. So not to say I could even relate to it. I was seeing people who are not me. Even if it was people of my same race, it still was me. So I didn't think of that. So I'm just helping put into context. And then...
But let me ask, just to put a pin in that. But if the mentality or the societal upbringing or even the trauma of your family's own experience of not achieving and looking down on particular jobs or particular careers or choices for a career path. There's also the fact that back then there would have been the Hazley Crawfords that would have achieved. Brian Lara and his 375. There are musicians that would have went out there, Sparrow, and we remember even the Harry Belafonte, the issues and so on that would have come up. So to me, it would have been the creative and even the athletics that would have been the ones that would go on to the, for lack of a better term, bigger areas that you would see on TV. So I would have asked myself as a parent, why is it then that you weren't encouraging your children to also be that for your way out, for your ticket out, as opposed to sticking to we want you to be a doctor, we want you to be a lawyer. Being an artist, you're never going to amount to anything. Being a musician, that's a hobby. Why are we not encouraging? Because those seem to be the ones that put us on the map. Even like at least back then. Now we hear more about businessmen and entrepreneurs and people going out and achieving. But I'm talking about when it was one channel, when it was one box, when we were considered a dot.
Fear. I would say fear, but not necessarily
Risk.
fear in the most negative way, because I think parents in general, no parent perfect, but I think most parents are sincere in their actions. And I want to see my child succeed. So don't go out in anything risky that you may not. So being an artist, I don't know many artists who make money. So you could paint and thing, but that is not what your career will be. Do something that we think is safe. And of course, let's say coming from a dot, we didn't have internet then, right? Or didn't access to the internet in the way we have it now. Our world, we were looking at the world through a very small hole. So if in Trinidad and Tobago, a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist. Those were the people that succeed.
In your immediate sphere, in your
Yeah.
communities,
Or
those
your
are the ones
teacher,
that you
or
would
your
see.
teacher.
Or your teacher.
That achieved in your
be
environment.
that.
Yeah.
Just be that. Don't think about nothing else.
So
Right? So I understand.
So I think how that works for me is like to piggyback on what you're saying, we were so limited in what we had in our own country that they wanted to make sure that you go in a safe space to succeed. Right?
Which is limiting.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. But then when you go to the United States or wherever you go, England or Canada or wherever, the opportunities are much more open. And I think, for me anyways, coming from Trinidad, I give credit all the time because I never felt in the United States as a second-class citizen. Because I tell people all the time, I grew up with black doctors, black lawyers, so if the opportunity arise and you put the work into it, it was the work ethic that got us to where we needed to be. And so once I was in the United States and opportunities were there, I always felt that if I put the work into it, I will succeed at it. And that was my out in everything that I did. And I think it worked for me for sure.
So, Mike, you mean you've traveled? I mean, Johan, say everyone. I mean, you studied abroad as well. I mean, Alvin, you live abroad. One of the things that I would really love for Trinbagonians to really know and accept, even though you are, whether you're determined to say, I want to move abroad, whether you're here in Trinidad and Tobago, the advent of social media allows you to see it, is to understand and really, really understand how special it is to be Trinbagonian. Not just the accent. We're not just talking about the unique look, the fact that you get to say you're from Trinidad and Tobago. I would cherish that passport above any passport in the world to be able to say, hey,
agreed.
I have this passport. And if many people really accept that and understand how unique and powerful it is to say I'm Trinbagonian, because when you go, like you said, you're not a second-class citizen. You're bringing something to the table. There are many people, whether they know it or not, are probably like, hey, I want to be like, there was back in the day, I want to be like Mike, no, you, Michael Jordan, right? You get to be Trinbagonian, and if you recognize that and what that brings, and that you are indeed a champion mindset, you are limitless.
I'll tell you something that I learned from my years of traveling and racing and staying in other people's houses, right, and so on, all different parts of the world. The Caribbean is romanticized. Being part of the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, is one of the most impactful as far as culture, what the rest of the Caribbean takes on as symbolic items or iconic devices to represent the Caribbean, the steel pan, calypso, limbo. You actually have to see, well, these things were invented in Trinidad and Tobago. Everywhere I went, I remember going to Germany not so long after the wall came down. And I was staying at a place where, at a guy's house that I used to read about in magazines. His name is Jens Glücklich. And he had like about 10 World Championship medals and so on. And then all of a sudden, I'm hanging out with these people, and I'm in a town where, no black people, right? And when I'm leaving there, you didn't have no WhatsApp, nothing like that. When you're gone, right, you send one, I reach, and then they know what day you're coming back, right? So I remember people telling me, you sure you're going there? Where you going? And for me, wherever I went to these places, where you from? And people's faces would just light up. And it was just a really great experience in terms of, because they just, didn't have any internet or whatever it is. The window was the individual in terms of being able to ask questions and to share with them some. I remember training with the Australian national team for a couple of years, and one day they were asking me about calypso, and the one thing that I could have thought that would have been funny for them was to sing Sparrow's, no, not that one, Headhunter, right? And so, who there? And
I never eat how white people.
So people.
And you thought that was funny.
I thought that was funny until they started calling me Congo Man. Congo Man. I was like, who told me to sing that calypso? But it really is. There's some things that we take for granted, and
I think plenty things.
there are a lot of
Yeah,
things that
that's true.
we take for granted.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
and pushing yourself and exploring. And I think, you know what, one of the challenges we have is having people like this and not having them utilized as far as I said, being able as an indicator and that story being told. And
I mean,
think we need-
I think also that, our country, where we're situated, the resources that we have here, first and foremost being an educated society. I think also, for many years, tourism was not a big part of who we were. I mean, the majority of people that even came during Carnival and stuff was because they knew somebody that kind of invited them here. And so I think going, like I said, going into another country, another world, and not seeing yourself as a second-class citizen, and coming from the Caribbean and having a pride, to boast of the fact, we've got oil and we've got all the different things. There's a certain chip that we Trinidadians, I know I had on my shoulder that made me feel that I belong wherever I went. And so I think when you have that confidence in yourself, that kind of like elevates you to no limits, and that's my personal experience with that.
As you said that, I felt, and I shared this on an episode already, being to the World Cup in Qatar and comparing it to Germany, the passion of really being excited to go to a World Cup and supporting whether it be Brazil, France, England, you're putting on these shirts. But as much as I was enjoying flying the flag and doing a documentary out there was a huge part of me that really wanted to see Trinidad and Tobago be playing there, and to see in the same crowds, I would have liked to see the red, white, and black in that particular crowd. And I'm saying that because you mentioned about a dot, and knowing that this country it's so powerful and special to be part of, but yet still when you go out, because we're limited by our numbers, 1 point something million is not, New York in itself is 8 point something million people. We will never be en masse. You will never see those types of numbers. And there's, whether it comes from a position of trauma, I don't know what it is, but I think to see ourselves on that scale, so we're I wouldn't even say diamond in the rough. We are rare. We are rare and priceless. But at the same time, we're not quantity. We're quality. But there's something about it that, like I said, on the stage, even though you go, there's Trinis everywhere, and we're very proud, and most Trinis could actually name the obvious ones that are out there. And I'd like to see Alvin's name added to that list, that go out and represent and fly the flag. Sometimes there's parts of me that want the quantity, that want, which is why when we go away, you find that people commune. They come together in little communities to have the little Trinidad and Tobagos, wherever you are in the Atlantas or the New Yorks or the Baltimores, to have that piece of home. But I would love to see, like I said, a huge crowd, a red, white, and black.
Well, I think that, of course, the more we do things like this, is the more people will see it, and therefore will inspire more. That's one. So slowly but surely, I think that some of this small thinking will change, and already changing. Also, the few of us that understand this, that we could continue flying the flag high and encouraging it, because when we celebrate it, then it shows other people that they don't have a limit, and not be like the term you fashioned last time, and I'll use it in this way, because if as a Trini child, let's just say you look on TV and say, I feel I want to be an actor in Hollywood, you might be met with, well, who you feel you is, even by appearance. Right? You feel is a big actor, right? You feel is instead of saying, all right, maybe, you know what? Try it and see. Let me see if you understand the energy different. Because as soon as who you feel you is, now is a battle. And even if you had one spark, it's very possible that spark go on immediately. So I'm saying, and even to those viewing, yes, in your mind, your child or whoever it is, you may say, well, I don't know how they will do this, But the truth is, none of we know a lot of things and we accomplish it. You would say as a young person, I want to buy a house. But even in the process of getting it or something, you would be so amazed, wait, now I reach here. I want to pass, let me start SEA. And when you actually pass, I reach here and we all of us, we go up levels. We level up in areas that we never thought we would be. So why we still think things impossible?
But in the shock factor, as you just said, I want to ask Alvin and Michael, are you still going through the shock factor? We're not talking about the warmth of gratitude. I'm not talking about gratitude for what you've achieved. I'm talking about the shock factor where like, good, I can't believe that I have this shot, or almost like imposter syndrome. I mean, am I really? So if I come to you and I say, Alvin, and do you confidently say, I am an artist, I am an entrepreneur, I am a model? Like I'm talking about the various phases. And the same for you, Michael. Or are you saying it and you're one step away from somebody, like, we say in Trinidad, being fashionably unimpressed, and you're saying it, but you're hoping that I can validate that, or validate it by likes, or validate it by somewhat being impressed. Can you all stand on the strength of knowing that I am, that this is who I am, and not be taken aback by me going, but use a
You know what? I think we have to call a therapist on that one. No, because that is like so spot on, right? Like, even though all the things that I've accomplished now, but we're a product of our society, right? And I remember being a kid in Trinidad. There's so much that they teach you, and they try to put you in a box in a lot of ways that somehow has to affect you, And I know sometimes I question my success a lot of times, whether or not am I deserving of it. Almost it may have been things that just people said to you along the way, growing up, and somehow you have to kind of break out of that. I mean, I find in the United States, like I see examples where, parents, they're so over to an extra degree supportive of their children. And I remember how many times, like in my family or neighbors or whatever, I've heard people breaking kids down, making, or you're so like this, or you're so like that, or you can't do that. And I think back now, and I'm like, how many, souls have we broken, that could have done something else? And you never know what example or what effect saying negative things to children might be. And I think that makes a big difference in our lives.
So before we go to the break, I just want to hear from you with regards to where do you draw your confidence from, or are you one like or one comment away from saying, listen, you know what, I'm going to park this up because I still don't feel I'm it?
This is a tough question to answer, because especially when anything to do with promotion, entertainment, being in the public eye, there's a certain amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a certain amount of a character that you present to the public, as opposed to when you're home stressing over a painting. God, just this damn color, the perspective of this thing. I think that's an ongoing battle. For me in particular, I enjoy playing music. I enjoy the guitar. I still can't believe I'm doing it. So when people say, but you really sang that? I have the same question as well about myself, right? I think those are things that, especially when you want to achieve something that most people think that is not possible, or to achieve so many things in so many different areas that is not possible, you can't. Your customers are also those people that have doubts about what you're doing. And so you're trying now to not take up all the oxygen in the room when you walk into a room, because at the end of the day, they're looking at you. Will you have it all together? And bill collectors calling you. Something just happened. This just broke. You know what I mean? It's something, that deal fell through. that sort of stuff. And all of those things are happening because we think, and to a certain extent, people think failure is contagious. So, your limits is discovering when you've shot past and you have a crash. Like I give a story about my mother pulling me out from under a truck because my tire blew out and I slid out on a corner and went up under a truck. And she was following in a vehicle in this race with other people, and she and the other guy was following, pulled me out from my truck to straighten my handlebar for me to finish the race. That's not so. Most parents don't want to see the children go through things like that. My father pushed me as well too. I want to drop out a race. No, you're going back in. You're going to finish as much as small goals. Trauma is something that most people themselves are risk averse, and they don't want to see a fall. Really brave people is like, even with my kids, I think of the things I used to do. I don't want to see my son in I've been in an ambulance so many times, and it's probably things that gives it the resilience. But I don't want to see my children in an ambulance. My mother was like, okay, get up and go. So from a parenting perspective, we
know.
Yeah.
We do what we think is protecting them, but really and truly, and you. I know we're going to a break, but just to say that so many times I see even my 8-year-old. I mean, I was wild. I did all sorts of extreme sports, flying, diving, and I look at him now and I say, he says, Dad, I really want to come on a hike with you, and I'm very measured about the hikes that I take him on for many reasons, be it snake, be it the cliffs, be it, whatever the case may be. And I think back then, as you quite rightly pointed out, there was no WhatsApp, there was none of these things. You would just go and come back in the evening, know you had to come back for a certain time to eat, and your parents seemingly wouldn't ask where it was or what happened or go and look for you. But are we creating...
Even though once in a while some child will get washed away in a drain, they still wasn't panic.
So they would just nonchalantly say, don't get washed away, or don't dare that, right? And then lay
so are we then, before we go to, are we then creating a weaker generation? But we'll talk about that after the break.
This is Manhood, and we're discussing today, do you have limits? Do we have limits? And, Michael and everybody here, we're just going at it. So,
the question is, do we still have, yes, there are limitations. Yes, there's obvious limitations, but you don't know what that limitation is unless you do, unless you try. And sometimes there's social media, there's all this information out there. So we're not talking about, I don't have to stick my hand in a socket to know I'm going to get shocked. But we're talking about life. We're talking about the opportunities and the possibilities, because it's only the persons that don't follow, the person that go in the other direction, that's when things change. Because if we're doing the same things over and over, we're going to get the same result. It's the person that go against the norms and break the molds and are seen as the rebels are the ones that are then later on in history seen as the pioneers. And, so many times, even in karate, they always say, the board is here. And if you see just the board and you go to hit the board, you're never going to break through. You must see your hand past the board. And that's when you break out. And I was sharing with you guys the story of when I was growing up. All I ever wanted to do was fly. I wanted to join the Royal Air Force. I wanted to go and follow in my dad's footsteps. And all I could see was myself flying one of the fighter jets. And my grandmother, God bless her soul, all she'd hear me always talk about is fly, fly, fly. She said, oh gosh, you want to be a fly on the wall, it's fly, fly, fly. And it broke something in me, because it was like, I felt like I was annoying. It felt like I was saying something that clearly they did not see for me. And then that in itself would be taken on, I assume, by my dad and my mom. And for many reasons, of course, it would be costly to go to flight school at that point. They may not have seen it as their reality, because in their communities there was no pilots, etc. And I wonder if part of the limits that we set on ourselves is inherent of our circumstances, our communities, and it's not necessarily like they don't want you to become that, but for many reasons they may not be able to afford it, or they just don't see that vision and don't share it, and therefore can't push you towards that. But in order to have the next Lewis Hamilton, or to have the next Brian Lara and all these people, you must have a village behind you that pushes you to do something, or is it just always opportunity, preparation, luck, like you leaving to go there on a soccer scholarship, because back then there was a lot of football schools, and then succeeding based on the opportunities presenting itself in, well, what is still coined the land of opportunity?
I would say, I think is more the will to know. And KNOW. Because, Robert, you ever stick your hand in a socket? And
Yes.
get shot?
Yes.
Right. So you know that happens. But if I see it on YouTube or hear somebody say it, I don't know it. Right? It's still theoretical. And you only know something until you do it. So if somebody say, you think you could learn how to play the guitar? If I say no, I know I can't play the guitar, that's incorrect because I haven't tried.
I just want to clarify something here. So you're equating playing a guitar with sticking your hand in a socket that you have to try.
Yes.
So you're really coming back to the old say you had to burn to learn. You know when they say you don't have to burn to learn, you're saying
But
burn to
you don't
learn.
have to burn. You have to experience to know.
Yeah.
Because other than that, it's all theory. So I can't be a wherever wherever you think you can be. You don't know that yet until you
try.
actually do it, or until you actually try. And most times when you try, what has happened? You succeed, and may not be the exact way, right?
yeah.
Because from football to modeling
improvements.
to restaurant to artists, right? I didn't see that path, but because I was pursuing. And that's what I tell people all the time, and I test it in my own life. Pursue your desires. Pursue your goals. You may not reach exactly where you want to be. And that's where the luck comes in. So let me just give an example. Let's just say I have no job, I'm looking for a job. And I go and I say I'm going to apply for every place on Frederick Street, right? In my process of going, next thing I meet some big, I don't know, millionaire oil company or something. And you say, "Way boy, you're real lucky." But I'm not lucky because I had the intention to go out there to look for that job. And but the belief and the fear, because we all know fear is my imagination. Fear is the worst thing that we could imagine about a situation. And therefore we choose to act or not act based on imagination.
It's like worry as well. You know, what you're worrying about tomorrow is that may not actually ever manifest or happen, but you're still worrying, which is very similar to fear. I want you to just something that you mentioned there. So, because before we went to the break, we spoke about our own experiences and things that we would do or did, and we now allow our children to do it. So there's a thing called learning from experiences or learned experience, and therefore, what I'm trying to get from you is, I would have learned that sticking my hand in a socket is going to shock me. Am I now going to say to my son, go and stick your hand in that socket so that you know I'm trying now to say, because of what I went through, I want better for you. Or I have now experienced something, so I'm now more educated about something so that you don't have to fall in the same holes that I fell in. You can now get to different heights and maybe make your own slips along the way, but as your trajectory continues upwards.
Well, you see, I wouldn't say, "Hey, son, go stick your hand in a socket." But you could, what a parent could do, which is a guide, is tell, "Hey, son, when I stuck my hand, I got shocked. I remember shock being a certain degree of pain or discomfort or whatever it is." But if your son still say, "I want to try something," because we parents say, "I want to give my child everything I didn't have.
Right.
And I don't want my child to experience any of the hardships I have." But those hardships is what molded you into who you are.
Absolutely.
So when a child can't experience their own version of it.
I like what you said there. Their own version of it. So nobody's saying that they must get everything handed to them on a platter. But it doesn't mean that they have to go through. The reason why, as parents or as anyone, we work that hard, especially for those of us that have children, is so that they don't have to go through the same pains.
But what
So, for example, for me, I wouldn't want my son to have to start off with a student loan. Nobody's saying that he can't go through his own levels of hardships, but if I can put at least a foundation of, hey, you know what? Your tuition is paid for, so that when you start from base. Not having to still keep looking back, you make 5,000, you had to put 3,000 in a student loan. You can start from base, and therefore you can make your own mistakes, but your trajectory is north.
I agree with that, but you have to make sure that your son earns it, even though it may be in a different way than you. And I'll give an example. And this was always with my mom, that now I look at it as a blessing, right? I know we wasn't rich, but we wasn't poor. And I know my mother could have afforded certain things for me, but she used to make me work for it. Right? I remember I wanted a Super Nintendo, right? And the Super Nintendo, I can't remember how much it cost, but I had to do certain things. That sweep here was $1, this here was so forth and so on. And I remember, but I knew she could just buy it. Why do I have to do all these things? But I wanted it. So I did, and realized much more work that I could do. And then the irony was, when I accumulated the money, I was like, I didn't want to buy. I worked so hard. I go and spend my hard. But I put in it that way because I understood. She could have said all she could have said about the value of money. I would have never understood. I didn't know it. Now I know it. So I'm saying nothing wrong with giving your child the base. I'll give you examples similarly with my mom. Instead of taking a loan from the bank, I would take, she had the capacity, I take the loan from her, but I still had to pay it back. But so now it was different. She helped mitigate some things for me, but I still had to work. It wasn't handed to me.
And I think that's really important, because I did the same example with my kids growing up. Like one of my sons, when he was in high school, everybody was buying the $200 sneakers. My whole thing in my head was, okay, you don't have a job, and I'm not going to give you $200 to buy sneakers. At this age, I believe a sneaker, if the value of a sneaker that you can be comfortable with should be about $75. Okay. So I said to him, I will contribute $75 to this, because that's what my responsibility as a parent is, right? Mm-hmm. And if you want it, you can work and earn the rest for it. So once again, it came back to that same thing that you're saying. You're making a better way for them, but they're understanding the value that made you who you were as well, because that's what your parents did to you with less resources or whatever.
I want to bring it full circle to understand when the topic is, do you have limits? And we're exploring one, that you don't indeed have limits, because unless you try, you can't fail unless what's that saying? If you're going to fail fast, and success is a number of failures. And so why I asked about our kids, because I'm saying, is it something that we inherit, or it becomes generational in our behaviors? Because in the same way, when you know better, do better, or what we perceive as doing better, are we then limiting our children to their experiences, and thereby putting limitations on them? Are we then starting to, in their minds, limit them to what their possibilities could be?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Where does it stem from? Where does it come from? And that's why I want to have that conversation, where my own introspection now is, I'm realizing, okay, well, by me thinking that my son is these things are gonna happen in the same way it happened, am I then in some way subconsciously or consciously limiting him to what is potential?
Here's my theory, right? And then Michael will come in. This is what I've seen based on my professional work, and then doing some history, is that let's say people born between 1940s to 60s, right? They had to work a lot for little reward, right? However, the society, we don't even have to go back at slavery or anything like that. They had to work a lot for very little reward, and that was their reality of life. As society and civilization modernize, we have to do less, because I don't have to scrub my clothes anymore. I have a washing machine. So society progress in a certain manner. So every generation now would question, I don't have to work so hard. But the generation before try to make you work this hard because that's all they know. And of course, if somebody trying to make you do something, it would traumatize you. So we go further. Then I think those born between 1970s and 1980s, right? These would kind of be the millennials, right? We were traumatized because we started to realize that's when technology, we went from cassette to CD to et cetera, less of things. We started to realize we don't want to do this, but it traumatized us also. So now, based on our trauma, I don't want my child to go through that.
Right.
So it might be to the extreme now. You rather do nothing. All you have to do is study, right? You don't have to do no chores. I providing everything for you. You just have to do that. But of course, the irony is what happens now is they can't appreciate it. Right? And I'm not even vexed at the children. Or sometimes we say children entitled, all they to entitled. But it's who give them the entitlement is we. But I believe it comes from the trauma of being traumatized to now do so much for so little.
So we need to go around the room asking, basically what I'm asking for is advice, your own nuggets, so to speak, to the nation. Having achieved so much, gentlemen, and having achieved even in areas that you never thought you would be. Like you said, if you ask the 5-year-old or 10-year-old, if you would have achieved, not so much like someone saying, I know I will be successful, but in the many areas that you were and the way it all happened, what are some of the nuggets that you can impart? I remember one thing specifically when Muhammad Ali was asked about limits and limitations, and he spoke about even in exercising that how many can he do? Basically, the count will start when he was in pain. So only when the pain, in terms of you doing sit-ups, when you reach the point of what you believe at that point is your limit at 100 sit-ups, that's when the count started. And it's to keep showing that the champion mindset in the body, and we're all champions. It's just some recognize it and some have experiences that put them in that sphere and have no choice and then realize they can, is when you recognize that you can achieve or that you have indeed achieved, which is why I asked the question, if you are still in that zone of still almost imposter syndrome, or if you are now resolute, confident to be able to say, I am a musician, I am an artist, I am this, I am that. So I'd leave the floor open to starting with you, Mike, to leave. This is your camera here.
Yeah. So I can't remember anything that I've gotten easy, meaning that it's a cherished memory. Everything that I have, that I hold dearly, is something that I worked very hard for, bled for, recovered from breaking a bone or two. Having put myself in a position, always discomfort, and a big part of growth and doing something that is extraordinary is facing really uncomfortable situations, putting yourself and exposing yourself, chest wide open. I think for me, part of my process, everybody may be different. I think I would always be chasing all of those. I'm not one to be satisfied. Great race, Michael. I like it, and I'm thinking, boy, that cone wasn't in the right place, and that sign wasn't up in the right. So it's for me, it's haunting that those things, those accolades, are very short lived, and you use discomfort as a motivator to draw on for something else. For me, my music comes from when I think of things that I've experienced and so on. Because a coach that I had once, an Australian coach, he said, one day he was giving a pep talk and he was saying challenges are opportunities to build character. And I always held on to that because it's one of the ways that you can probably understand that difficult time, just like when you rep in the gym, when lactic acid burning living daylights out to you, is probably the ingredients you need for progress and becoming stronger. So at least that's my process that I think I'll always be haunted by. That wasn't, I enjoyed it, but maybe I could go better. Maybe I could have just learned this a little better. So that be complacency. I'm trying to fight off complacency by it. I don't know if that's the right formula, but let's see.
Well, for me, it's a great topic, first of all, like, having limitations. And I think that we bring so much, or we get so much from who our parents are. And I give a lot of credit to my grandparents who raised me. And I think I had a certain confidence in myself growing up, and then having the opportunities to be, outside of this country, and the opportunities being open even more so. And you bring that work ethic that you have, and there's whatever that's in your mind that you feel that you can do. No one really knows what's on the inside of you and how deep you're willing to dig and pull out what's going on. So when you tell somebody something, and they might have they're bringing their own doubts into what they have in their minds, but they can't tell what's inside your soul. So you're the only one that knows that. And my whole thing is like, if you decide to do something, right, as difficult as it might be, you can't always think of towards the end so much. You have to think about that journey that you're going to be taking. And, they said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So you take that step and you do the best that you can with that step, and then you take the next and you keep going. And it's really perseverance. And I guess in that term, there's really no limitations until you decide that you want to be finished with it. So those are the messages that I've learned. And sometimes, the universe brings things to you, and you have to be wise enough to know, okay, you know what? Should I pursue this? Am I able to put the work in for it? Do I want to, is this what I really want to do? And at the end of the day, it's really finding the happiness in yourself and finding that comfort in doing what you feel is best for you to do. And that's my take on my success anyways.
Okay. The question is, do we have limits? And I would say you won't know that until you do something. So if you're afraid to do something, if you're wondering, if you're limited, try it first. And only then you will know. And most likely within the process you realize you could do much more than you really think you can. And I'll just give something quick. I always say, and there's a story I give. If somebody asks you to walk from Port of Spain to San Fernando after a long day of work, you wouldn't want to do it. But if I say you'll get $2 million, you'll probably find the energy to do it. But where you get the energy from? So when you really want to do something, and something that is of value to you, that's the important part. Because when I'm listening to you all did things that you all thought were valuable to you. And so people in careers that they don't really like, they won't really put their limit. People who are being forced or pigeonholed, as you were saying, into things you don't really want to do, you will never have your full potential. But if you find something you like and you push, there's no limit.
This show, success by many measures, that we always aim to be better as brothers, and we're successful by that note because we have been a space of courage. This is, I can't tell you specifically what episode, but it's 90 plenty, as I say. And it was never, as you would know, it was never meant to start. There were so many hurdles along the way, as to why it shouldn't be brought on. And yet still, as I said, we're at episode 90 plus. So the message there is, on your journey to success, never take no for an answer. Every failure is one step closer to success. One of my mantras, those who know me with regards to whether I present, whether I direct in a production, or just in general in life, is I never have a plan B. The plan A always exists. It's how many plans it takes to get to plan A. And with that mindset, I say to you, the world is your oyster. Never give up, never be limited. Johanse, Alvin, Michael, a pleasure. This is Manhood.
Manhood, brought to you in part by Solomon's Bespoke.